Good morning. Welcome to the Board of Supervisors for our April 10th, 2007 meeting. At this time, can we please have the roll call?
Supervisor Long? Here. Supervisor Foy?
Here.
Supervisor Bennett?
Here.
Supervisor Flynn?
Yes.
And Supervisor Parks?
Here. We also have on the agenda moment of affirmation. I'd like to go to agenda review because we don't have anyone that has come in from our community to speak on that item. So,
Madam Chair, members of the board, there is one modification. Item 28 has an attachment added.
okay, we have an attachment to item 28, and I would ask that we also remove item 3, the moment of affirmation. Are there any other requests on our agenda review?
Move the agenda as modified.
Motion is second. Seeing no objection, that passes. And then let's go ahead and do the Pledge of Allegiance. And Supervisor Long, would you please lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Then this is to continue to
do we?
April 17th. Is that the motion? Thank you. We have a motion.
Second.
And a second. Seeing no objections, then the minutes will be continued to April 17th. We'll now move on to item 7, and this is the consent agenda items 10 through 15. We have a motion and a second on items 10 through 15. And one question I did have, Mr. Johnson, I didn't know if you were able to determine. We had the one grant for the authorization for the sheriff, item 14, that was to become effective April 8th, 2007 to June 30th, 2007. That's just to spend it during this fiscal year. Is that correct?
So the sheriff's office is here.
I was just wondering because it's such a short period, but that is, I'm imagining, just to spend for this fiscal year.
Madam Chair, Commander David Tennyson with the Sheriff's Office. That's correct. This is a grant for this fiscal year, but we fully anticipate the grant to be renewed next year as well.
Okay, because it does have 2 full-time positions and all. I wouldn't want to just have them for a couple months.
Correct. We don't either.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for indulging me in my question. We had a motion and a second on our consent agenda items, and seeing no objection, then that passes. And we'll now go to public comments, and we have Carol Dean Williams who wants to speak.
Good morning. Carol Dean Williams, 61-year resident. Thank you, Mr. Johnson, for cooling my First Amendment emotions this morning. And Ms. Cohen, thank you. Mr. Foy, Ms. Cohen is an example why there should not be term limits. She is an elected official, and her exemplary character should never be turned out of office. I have some information from her addressed to the residents of Ventura County. This is the introduction to your budget. And this is her mission statement and values. We will honor the public trust through open and honest communication with the public. Your county council will talk to the press, but he won't talk to me, and I have every right to be answered just as he answers the press. He told me this morning if you ordered him not to talk to the press, he can't talk to me. I'm asking you to order him to no longer spend his county time talking to the press. Meaningful public participation in the decision-making process. Ms. Cohen, I hope you're re-elected every time. Now, I want to quote a citizen that I don't know. This is Irma Redneck. I heard the lights went out, and I wonder if only one deputy in one criminal courtroom pulled his gun, or if all deputies did. But listen to what Miss Irma Rednick says. Just the lack of sense we as citizens of this county do not want serving on juries. Thank goodness we were not there when the lights went out for the 20 to 30 seconds as stated in the articles. Shot in the dark. Well, this is April Poetry Month. Lawyer up, Claybaum. Claybaum up, County Council lawyer. Skirts howdy, a woman is getting ready to take your place, a page out of Tom Sawyer. Does Ventura County Ordinance 4197 in any way, shape, or form prohibit non-cell phone cameras in the Hall of Justice? I've got an answer. No, it don't prohibit non-cell phone cameras. A camera is a camera, Sergeant Bailey agreed. Then in his stupidity, he said, one is allowed, the other violates the need. Claybaum up. Who's blowing air up your skirt? Sergeant Bailey, Sergeant Zacklow, this is stupidity. Two jerks. Does Ventura County Ordinance 4197 in any way, shape, or form allow cell phone cameras in the Hall of Justice? A camera is a camera, Sergeant Zacklow agreed. Then in his stupidity he said, Carol Dean, we discriminate, you see. Claybaum up. Who's blowing smoke up your asinine? Sergeant Bailey, Sergeant Zacklow, this is incompetence on county time. Thank you.
That concludes our public comments for this morning, and we can now go to board comments. Supervisor Flynn, would you like to begin?
Yes, thank you very much. I have a list of people I'd like to ask the board to adjourn in memory of it. And secondly, I'd like to commend the sheriff and all those who had participated in getting a grant to treat mentally ill people out of the jail. I don't know how many that means, but it will certainly be helpful for one thing, jail population. The other is that people with mental illness in the jail is probably the wrong place for them. So I commend the sheriff for that program and for following up and getting another grant, because we did have one 3 years ago, and I think it worked out very well. So my commendation to the sheriff.
Thank you. Supervisor Bennett?
Thank you. I'd like to ask the board to adjourn in memory of the people on this list. Two people that I'd like to call out. One, a longtime Ventura County firefighter, Thomas Henry O'Malley Sr. He's a Ventura County Fire Department for 35 years. He joined the fire department in '57, retired as a fire captain in 1991. And we just lost him. Teresa Hernandez retired from the city of Ventura after 21 years of service, and the other people on this list. I too was happy to see that we received a grant in terms of the mentally ill and the jail. Also note in this morning's paper an issue that we spent a lot of time, certainly at the Air Pollution Control District, focusing on. That was the LNG decision by the State Lands Commission. Supervisor Flynn and myself both testified yesterday there, and that was a very big community turnout for that particular event. So it was good to see. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Supervisor Foy?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I just want to say I don't have anybody to adjourn for today, but I do want to make for a young, well, I won't say young lady, Mary Spingola, who celebrated her 102nd birthday in our district, which was great. She was born in 1905 in New York and moved to California 25 years ago. She had 5 sisters, and she was married for 74 years. That's a big deal. And she also has another sister still living. So those are always great to hear, people that are living that long. It's wonderful. So that's my comments for the day. Thank you.
Supervisor Long?
Yes, good morning. Thank you. And I think there'll be a lot more of us doing that, I think. I don't know about that 74 years of marriage, though. I have a list to submit to adjourn in memory, and don't really have anything else to report out onto the board, so we'll just get on with our work today. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to also ask that the board close in memory of the people on this list, including Eugene Joseph Fidel. And Mr. Fidel was a Ventura County Agricultural Commissioner Inspector back in 1958. So he will be missed, as well as the others on our list, and we greatly appreciated the service that they gave. I also point out that in addition to it being National Poetry Month, we also have National Garden Week and National Sibling Day. So I have a whole list of things here so we can garden with our siblings. That concludes the board comments, and let's go ahead and move on to our regular agenda items then. Our first one is item 24, and this is with our Harbor Department, and I did see Ms. Krieger.
Good morning, members of the board. Mr. Johnston, Lynn Krieger from the Harbor Department. And I have two items for you this morning. The first is simply an amendment, but I am going to take a moment on this because there have been a few questions. We do have two representatives of the lessee here today, Jane Simonis and Steve Binger, and they can answer any questions for you that I cannot. At this point, I think you all remember the fire, the disastrous fire that happened at Marine Emporium Landing about a year and a half ago now. I can't believe it's been that long. Move this over. It's actually, this is the slide for the next one. There. And the Bingers have gotten through the insurance process, which was no small feat. Those of you who are involved with casualty losses, that's a big process. They've gotten through with us the Coastal Commission staff review process. They've gotten through the building permit process, which I think took about 9 months. Is that right? And got very involved. They now do have their building permits for the replacement building, and now they're on to what usually ends up being the hardest part, which is the banking portion of the process and obtaining the loan. And that process, as you know, we often have amendments once we get to the bank loan. In this case, it's being dramatically affected by the construction cost change, even in the year and a half since this new lease was entered. We've gotten some comments from the public that I'm sure the Bingers would be happy to refute, that how lucky they are that their building burned down because it makes it easier for them to start from scratch. And it has not been easy for them at all. They have worked really diligently. They've probably spent more time in our offices in the last year, would you say, than in the 9 years preceding that, trying to get this all worked out. So I want to just thank them in advance for their cooperation on that. I'm going to pause for just a second. I know these boxes on page 2, the current fiscal year budget projections, are a little confusing. This is for the enterprise fund. You remember we operate right now out of 4 funds, and it does show an estimated deficit for year end of $712,000. The primary reason for that is we did not, although we spent the money, we did not budget the revenue from FEMA for the storm losses we had a couple of years ago. That revenue actually arrived this week. It's well over $600,000, so we will be doing another budget adjustment, and that will change that number significantly. But our effort is to balance across all the funds, and in the next board item you'll see that. But if you have questions about that, you can let me know. In terms of this amendment, there are a number of things that have not changed. It was a 40-year extension total, which was 35 plus 5 for additional expenditures, which they're obviously not going to do. It's now just a standard 40 extension. It still requires replacement of the docks and the burned down building before any extensions happen, which means that they'll have their money in hand, their building permits, and they'll be under construction. There's probably an unfortunate word in the board letter on top of page 3. It says an immediate 25-year extension. It's immediate, but based on all the same conditions that we always have, and that is we need to see the contract with the contractor, we need to have the bank loan documents in hand, we need to have everything that we normally have before any extension takes place. The investment that's going to be made now is going to be almost $8 million compared with the almost $5 million that was projected just a year and a half ago. Some of that is because of improvements to the site that the lessee is electing to make that will improve it for everybody. In addition, and you can see it here, within the existing pier head line, the lessee has found, and additionally you can see this is where the docks currently end. This does not extend outward into the channel at all, but they have found 14.5 feet within the existing pier headline, which comes across this way and across this way, that will make it easier to serve their commercial sport fishing tenants into the future. One of those is a dedicated bait pen. That's the blue box.
Can you put your microphone on, Supervisor Flynn?
Just if you could go through the amendment
Right.
again, it affects the blue part.
Okay, it's mainly a timing amendment, but this was the original docks. Now, assuming we've got a notice of impending development that is being submitted on this, but right now the docks fit in this square right here. And I'm expecting a shout behind me if that's wrong. And there is room within the existing pier headline, because here's the channel out here, to add this 14.5 feet, which allows them to have more flexibility for the size of commercial vessels they have on that side of the dock area. But it doesn't extend into any other pier headlines. That area's always been there, it just wasn't needed, and now that they're tearing out the whole dock area, there is room to do that. This also places in, because this lease was approved before the board had requested this change, includes the recommended authorization for the director to take a look at bank loans and approve those and then forward to the board once that happens, with the concurrence of the CEO's office and county council. We have also added, and I do have red lines here, some detail about what's required in the projects that has resulted from Coastal Commission review and the building permit process since the lease was required. So we actually have tightened up the requirements somewhat with the cooperation of the lessee. The real changes have to do with the order that the term is given. Originally, the replacement of the slips was to receive 5 years. It's now 10. That's in order to satisfy the bank loan. Remember, without a change in the total number of years. The city has placed a requirement for a large trash enclosure, one of those automated compression type trash enclosures, which is very expensive, as part of the H2 reconstruction. So those years were also increased to 15 to accommodate the additional expenditure they're making. Otherwise, things remain relatively the same, taking us to the 40-year total. The H1 building was originally 7 years, is now 5. So all we've done is adjust within that 40 years where those years would go in consultation with the lessee and the bank to make sure that we're meeting their needs. So we would respectfully request your approval of this amendment. It will allow the lessee to proceed with their construction and get this thing taken care of.
Just one.
Supervisor Flynn?
When does the clock start on the 40 years then?
Once they have at this point, they are taking the risk. They're under construction on the H2 building because they have their permits and they want to get tenants back in there and get income flowing. So once we have their construction contractor documents and the bank loan approval documents, then the term would be extended just for those two pieces of the project. It's a phased, as approvals are received, they get the years that attach.
This particular request also comes with an opportunity to increase slip sizes, which is, I guess, the extra 14 feet that they found that they can do without going into the waterway. Or up
Yeah,
here,
these
beyond
are
the river.
primarily commercial sport fishing vessels, so there is no proposed change in this basic portion. It's just over here.
My question is, as I look at an aerial of this, I don't know if you have
Yeah,
that
we have one more here.
available, but
This is sideways.
it looks like it's being squeezed in there pretty good next to, what's it, X2 or something? I'm looking at
Oh,
it.
you mean right here, or are you talking about on this side?
I'm talking about along, let's see,
This is where the 14 feet is.
where X1C is and X1B is.
This is the commercial fishing marina here, and it does not impede the waterways that are adjacent to that commercial marina.
Do you have an aerial of the
I don't,
area?
other than
Okay.
this.
I noticed that it was included in the second lease, and I do want to thank you for providing both leases. It's nice to have that instead of having to try to get it through the clerk's office. Not
You're
that
welcome.
it's difficult to get it through the clerk's office, it's just more direct coming from you.
It's more convenient. No, we're happy to do
I
it.
appreciate having that, and I also appreciated, and at least in the next lease that we'll be looking at, you do have an aerial in there, and you get a good overview of the area as opposed to this one, which is very localized.
Yeah, you can see the dock, or this is actually a gangway. The dock goes out in a straight line from this area so that you can see there's still vacant waterway beyond.
Right, but without
where the
seeing the
boats would be.
property immediately adjacent to it,
Right.
it's hard to determine what this,
Okay.
how close it is to the other parcels, but obviously it's within the requirements of,
Yeah, these will be subject to a notice of impending development, so there will still be review of this project, and we can certainly forward. We don't have an aerial overlay, I don't believe, of this one, do you? No.
Is it the Coastal Commission or the Coast Guard, or who determines what the minimum amount of distance between slips can be? I guess
There
that's the
are
fairway.
3 places. There are standards that are issued by the State Department of Boating and Waterways, and the newest standards were just issued, I think, in 2001 or 2. And then the Coast Guard also takes a look, and then the California Coastal Commission decides if they concur.
Okay.
But they have the least technical.
And all
knowledge.
3 of those bodies have a say on what the fairway should be? Is that the right word, fairway?
Yes, yes.
Between the adjoining docks?
Yes, they do.
Okay. And are they all the same number by any chance?
Not usually. Not usually.
Does this meet the most conservative numbers?
It meets the
Or all
Department of
3?
Boating and Waterways criteria, which is usually the most conservative.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair,
Supervisor,
I'd like to make a motion.
please.
I move that we adopt the recommended action. I think that we've had a tenant there for a long time and a father there for a long time, and they've really served the county well. They're very honest, forthright, and so that's my motion.
We do, I'm sorry, have 2 cards. If the speakers still want to speak, knowing that the motion seems to be favorable.
Only if you have questions.
I don't know if we have questions. We do have a motion and a second, though. And if you would like to waive your speaking, we'll go ahead and call the vote then. Seeing no objection, that passes. Thank you. Good luck. Glad to see it move forward. And now on to the next item, that's 25.
Yes, item 25 is a new amended and restated harbor lease for Anacapa Marine Services. This is the smallest boatyard, the smaller of 2 major boatyards in the Channel Islands Harbor. And this is actually the result of several years' work with this lessee who's taken a look at what it is he can do here. This is the standard lease form that has been adopted for the other new leases that have been entered since the end of 2003. You will note here we're asking for an approval of this. Obviously, what the lessee is proposing is 2 phases here. This lessee, boatyards are different than structures. He's proposing to spend in excess, probably about $4 million, in excess of $3.8 million. A great deal of that goes toward equipment. Obviously, if it's in a boatyard, stationary equipment such as lifts, ways, also improvements to the site. All the pavement needs to be redone. They have done a fair amount of work already on their stormwater filtering system, settlement tanks, and so forth. They intend to do more of that kind of work as knowledge has increased over the years about what boatyards can contribute in terms of runoff. This lessee has also been a highly honest and good performer, and there is a need for a boatyard of this size. Unfortunately, the lessee, who's used to these items coming up later, has not made it here yet. I guess he's in his car. Oh, you did get here. Okay. You weren't here when I got up. Really, that's all I have to say on this one, unless there are questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions on this? Do we have any cards? I don't see any. We do have a motion and a second. Seeing no objection, that passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you
for being here, in case we did have questions. Yes, nice to see that get renovated there. Item 26, this is our healthcare agency, is that right? Regarding BCMC. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Parks. Good morning, Mr. Johnston and members of the board. This is a request to ratify and approve a contract with Dr. John Fankhauser Under the terms of the agreement, Dr. Fankhauser would serve part-time as Associate Medical Director of Ventura County Medical Center while maintaining a part-time clinical practice at our Family Care Center. This is part of the reorganization of our medical leadership structure, which we presented and described to your board last month during the approval of Dr. Gonzalez's contract. Again, under the new structure, Dr. Gonzalez will be medical director for both inpatient and outpatient services, serving in a full-time capacity, and there will be a part-time inpatient and a part-time outpatient associate medical director working with Dr. Gonzalez. And Dr. Fankhauser will be assuming the duties, and actually has assumed the duties, of the associate medical director for inpatient services. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
We have one question, Supervisor Foy.
Does this require us to hire somebody else to fill in for the part-time that he was not being able to do his work yet? Are we going to hire somebody new for that, or what?
Essentially what we're doing is we're pulling him out half-time from the Family Care Center and replacing him with 2 doctors that are going to share that position in that time that he served in the Family Care Center. So essentially there will be money taken out of the Family Care Center contract because Dr. Fankhauser will be leaving, but then new money will have to be put in to hire the new physicians. And that contract is being reworked as we speak, and we'll come to this board.
Okay, so he's leaving.
Part-time.
Part-time, but we're going to hire 2 more?
2 doctors are going to share the position.
But there's going to be 2 more doctors coming in?
They're going to share. 2 doctors are each going to spend a quarter of their time in the Family Care Center.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Because when they're in the Family Care Center, they're not just providing care; they're also teaching as well. So what we try and do is have as many physicians as we can from outside in the clinic system come into the Family Care Center and spend time teaching.
Right.
And these 2 physicians have worked in the Family Care Center on and off.
So are you going to come back to us then for 2 more positions, that we're going to be hiring some more people?
We're going to come back with a revised Family Care Center contract, but the net dollars will be the same.
So there's not going to be any change in what we spend anyway?
No. A new number of bodies, same number of dollars.
Okay.
Revenue neutral, huh?
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yes.
Okay. Do we have any other questions or comments on this?
Move the item.
Motion and a second. Seeing no objection, that passes. And then our next item is also with the VCMC, and this is ratification of an authorization for Healthcare Agency Director.
Good morning again. This item is a request to ratify and approve a amended provider agreement with Valley Care IPA. It's a large provider group in the Santa Clara Valley, and the amendment will allow us to include anesthesia and outpatient therapy services in our contract with them. Essentially allows patients of Valley Care providers to access the Santa Paula Hospital and use the anesthesia services and the outpatient physical therapy services that we have there. It allows Valley Care doctors to basically send their patients to our facility for treatment. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Sounds like a good idea.
It's a great idea.
Do we have a motion? We do have a motion and a second. Seeing no objections, that passes. Thank you for the reports and bringing it forward. We'll move on then to our item 28, and Supervisor Flynn will be taking off. This is our auditor controller and the auditor's report.
Chair Parks, members of the board, I'm asking that you follow the recommendation to receive and file this item, the auditor's report on the statement of money in the county treasury. And inadvertently, we forwarded this item to the clerk of the board without the notes, and those were distributed to your offices yesterday and again at the dais today. Those are considered an important part of the audit. If you have any questions.
Are there any questions on this report? Seeing none, do we have a motion to receive and file? We have a motion. Do we have a second to the motion? And a second. Whew, it's a close one. Seeing no objection, then, that passes. Thank you for the report. Thank you for the notes, faxed to our office. Our next item on the agenda is item 29, and this is a recommendation of Supervisor Foy for some appointments.
Yes, I'm recommending Mark Cassara for the tobacco settlement allocation. This is only until June because there's a unexpired term probably coming back to you to ask for the rest of that. and then also to reappoint several members to the Aviation Advisory Commission, Water District 1 and 9. I'm sorry, 19.
I'll second it and note you're starting to work down that
List of appointments.
I'm starting.
It's a project. Good
Well,
for you.
Well, you're going to finish this, but I was going to ask when we're going to see some of that stuff from your office. Soon?
We do have a motion and a second. Seeing no objections, that does pass. And a question regarding the report back on our committees and board appointments and the review of all those different kinds of committees that may not be as necessary. We're all looking at you.
I'm making a note. I'll find out.
Okay,
I'll
well,
get back to you on where they are on that.
thank you. It is kind of an ongoing process because terms expire and you bring more on, and so it's that will be really good to have that report back, particularly if we're appointing people to committees that may dissolve. Okay, our next item on the agenda is a recommendation by Supervisor Flynn to appoint Bonnie Burnell to the El Rio del Norte Municipal Advisory Council. Mr. Supervisor Flynn has left for the day, but I would imagine since this is on the agenda, this is something that he supports, and I will go ahead and move the item.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for item 30, and then seeing no objection, then that passes. We'll go now to item 31. This is the resource management, weights and measures. And this is to spend unanticipated revenue.
Good morning, Chairman Parks and board members. I have no presentation, but I'm here to answer your questions.
Yes,
I have to ask a question.
we need a little more information.
Yes, I was going to say,
Supervisor Foy?
you're getting additional revenue or just unanticipated revenue?
Unanticipated revenue. Some of it's coming from fines.
Right.
Basically, we don't budget and know how much we're going to fine people, but as the year goes on, and dial it in, we realize, we are in fact going to receive more money in penalties and fines than was originally anticipated. And then the others from device registration, money that we charge revenues to offset our expense of inspection.
Right.
And those are coming in higher than originally expected. We do have some unexpected expenses, things that were unbudgeted. We moved from El Rio to the Saticoy facility, and there's a budgeted item for security. We didn't pay security in El Rio, but are being charged for that in Saticoy. We have a number of other unanticipated expenses that have come up this year. So basically, we have a source of revenue, and we do have some expense needs.
How would you have handled that if this revenue wouldn't have come?
I don't know, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
The security issue was a complete surprise to us. I mean, like I said, we didn't have security in El Rio. General Service Administration determined that we needed it in Saticoy. Each unit was charged that expense. We weren't expecting it. It's a ISF transfer, and obviously, if you don't have the revenue, you have to wait till you open the next budget year to then move and pay the money. But there were things that came up that we were unaware of. Transportation charges came up higher this year than we were originally believed them to be.
I guess I just come back from the idea is if it always seems that if extra money comes up, there's always a way to spend it. And as we're moving into tighter budget situations here, I'm always looking to say, is there a way for us to find ways to tighten our own belt versus just spending it just because it came? That's why I asked you, if you didn't have it, you'd have to find a way to make the payment, right?
Correct. These are internal charges. Transportation, I don't know whether it's related to the increase in cost of fuel, but our fleet charge is greater than we thought that they would be for the year. These are bills that are coming due.
Right. I mean, it's not a lot of money, but it's still just the idea that a lot of little.
No, I understand. I understand what you're. I know. I understand what you're asking.
Yeah.
I hate to say, gosh, I feel fortunate there's a revenue source, but there is. And no, you ask a good question. What happens if the money hadn't come? The bill would still come due. We would still have to pay it. We would probably have to, pay it out of next year's budget. But
Right. Okay.
My question is, we know exactly how much the unanticipated revenue is. Don't know how much your costs are. Does the unanticipated revenue, is it sufficient to meet the unanticipated costs?
yes, it is. We know the security is going to be at least $5,600 for the remainder of this budget year. The ISFs for transportation are going to make up the major share of the balance. So, but all the bills will get paid from the revenue that we expect to come in.
And it is, we are talking a relatively small amount in comparison to certainly your budget and all.
Correct, but obviously any unbudgeted revenue, in order to recognize it and then spend it, requires your approval.
Can I ask
Yes,
one more-
Supervisor Foy has another question.
Can I ask the auditor, what, with this kind of money, is this some kind of money that could fall right to general funds?
When money comes in over what was budgeted, it's normally recognized as over-realized revenue. When you're asking to spend it, it's renamed to unanticipated revenue. It takes 4/5 vote to spend it. If the funds had not come in, there would be a normal request to contingency or some other mitigation account from the CEO to cover it. We don't pay it out of next year's budget. This year's expenses must be recognized this year.
Right. Okay. So, go ahead.
I'm afraid I have another question too. Looking at the first page, it lists 3 unanticipated revenue amounts.
Correct.
2.
Okay, that's
I'm sorry.
2,
One.
and that equal 26,800?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. All right, with that discussion, do we have any motions?
Move the recommended action. Second.
Motion is second. Are there any objections? Certainly.
I just have, it's interesting to me, it's just a difficult situation that if we push more fines, we get more revenue. I have a hard, it's like the Highway Patrol. People think when the Highway Patrol writes a ticket, they get money for it. The Highway Patrol gets no money for a ticket they write. I just have a hard time with this fine issue because if I'm looking for more revenues, I can find more fines. And
I would tell you that the revenue that's in the stream, these are matters that I can tell you, well, I can't tell you what the name of the retailer is, but it's an ongoing state investigation. The matter is expected to be settled in the next 30 days. It involves
No, I understand.
$9,000 of investigative costs back to the county.
Right.
That request to be reimbursed for those costs is over a year old. The matter is going to settle this
Right.
year. We don't take enforcement actions with the idea that we're going to be reimbursed our investigative costs, but we are. We call it unanticipated revenue because we don't anticipate it. And I agree with you. If it's a criminal action and it's in the court, we don't get any of the fine money, but we do get reimbursed our investigative costs. Any administrative action that we take against a retail business, we do get 100% of it, and that's in state law. I don't take actions and set fines with any budgetary idea in mind, and there are guidelines for setting those penalties. We don't hire personnel based on the expectation that we're going to realize these revenues.
Right.
That's not a sound source of funding, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a bounty hunter.
Yeah, that's where I have a hard time with some of it is that if we have overhead, we need to get revenue. We need to define revenue. I don't want to be in that situation. So.
I'm not running around looking for businesses to penalize for the purpose of making my budget. No.
Supervisor.
You don't have any quotas, huh?
Madam
Supervisor
Chair,
Long?
this
Mr.
does
Johnson?
require a 4/5 vote. Would it serve us better if we were to not act on this and continue it for a week so you could perhaps have further discussion to understand the investigative process and the DA gets a complaint and they go and investigate and the weights and measure folks are then brought into it and just to really understand the the revenue source. And I think the other piece of this is that generally there are some revenues that frankly, and I don't know if this is one, that's tied to if it's generated from this division, it stays in this division because it's tied to, the investigation or tied to the weights and measure responsibility.
The other pieces that, when they're out doing their regular activities, I have no problem with that. If, we have that many more scales we got to do or whatever, those are just normal things they should be doing, and that's all great stuff. I have no problem with, looks like most of these pieces. It's
well, like I said, on the other revenue item, we've had years where it's way up and we've had years where it's way down.
Right.
And we've had requests for cost reimbursement in for years, and then out of the clear blue sky it settles and a check arrives. We had the Albertsons matter earlier this year that we brought to your board to get authorization to spend that penalty money because it did specifically have to be spent for specified activity by the court. We don't have any control over those things.
Okay, I have no problem with this. We don't have to.
Okay. And that, Mr. Johnson, you wanted to comment?
Not to create a problem, but maybe to clear something up. Are these funds, I think this Supervisor Long was referring to, are these funds, are they restricted or by the GAN initiative? Maybe the auditor controller can answer that, but
they have to be spent for weights and measures enforcement activity. Yes.
Okay, that's the question that I'm trying to get to.
Yes.
It's not a general fund money that could be,
No.
I think the supervisor is concerned that it, when we have opportunities, put money aside for things like, the issues at the retrofitting the hospital and building the jail.
Sure.
I think that's what
No, and I understand and appreciate the supervisor's question. I mean, yes, these are earmarked monies. They have to be spent for that purpose. But no, I'm not running out looking to buy another vehicle or for some capital item. These are expenses that have come up in the normal course of business.
And I'm all for having the person who's violating pay for the investigative costs to make sure that they don't do it again and pay for the cost of the county to investigate it.
And we try and do that as much as possible.
Yeah. And otherwise, the others who are, keeping within the law end up paying. So I think it's appropriate.
I agree.
Okay, so we did have a motion and a second, and I was looking for objections. And did I have an objection? No. Then that does pass on a 4/5 vote. Thank you. Our next item is item 32, and this is the extension of the Sheriff's Department Public Safety Recruitment Plan Referral Program.
Good morning, Chris Godfrey, Chief Deputy, Sheriff's Department. Madam Chair, members of the board, Mr. Johnson, as you are aware, in 2005 you approved the institution of the referral program in an effort to increase recruitment in the county of Ventura as it related to deputy sheriffs and dispatchers. And I know if you've taken a look at the board letter, you are aware that these statistics may seem a little bit low when you consider other types of recruitment. However, I would like to say to you that out of the 116 referrals that we've had in the county to date, 5 of those have progressed, either graduated from the academy program where referrals were offered, or we have 2 more that are currently in the program. This sounds a little bit like a half-hearted effort. However, statistically, there's no question that the numbers that we've actually gotten through the academy program are consistent across the board with the sheer numbers of applicants that are necessary in order to get qualified candidates through the academy program at the end. A couple of weeks ago, I attended, I should say I testified before the Public Safety Committee up at the state legislature, and one of the concerns that we're having statewide is the issue of recruitment for law enforcement. 10,000 vacancies in law enforcement statewide right now. We're in a competitive market here in Ventura County, as they are statewide. But probably the most critical aspect of the sheer numbers that we're talking about is this. In order to get 10,000 officers positions filled in the state of California, you're going to need 440,000 applicants show up at the front doors of law enforcement agencies. 440,000. So we have a competing interest, and we also have an opportunity here within the county family of about 7,000 employees to make a difference. We know from a marketing standpoint that friends and relatives are the key to recruitment. Those 2 components are probably the greatest recruitment tool that we have. And I don't think we've but touched on the surface as it relates to recruitment in this county among the county family. So what we're asking here today is an extension of this program to 2010. And we promise, of course, to do a much better job internally within the county family to promote deputy sheriffs in this county and dispatchers in this county. We're in dire need of those, as you're aware, and I don't see that going away anytime soon. And I would love to answer any questions that you might have related to recruitment.
Do we have any comments, questions?
Yeah, obviously probably our most critical issue that we've been facing and stuff.
Yes.
So appreciate this opportunity to talk about it a little bit, and I certainly support this action. My question, just for background, what percentage of the candidates that come in are sponsored by somebody? Not coming out the door.
I believe the figure is about 60%.
About 60% of everybody that comes in, and is at that point in time, that's when the sponsor is identified for the candidate,
Yes.
right when they first
Yes,
come in.
that is correct.
Okay, good. That was a question I had. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I just appreciate the efforts. I know, as being an employer trying to find quality people, and you've got very strict standards, and I'm
Yes.
glad you stick those standards, 'cause I've seen other departments who don't, and it causes a lot of problems.
It
So I know
does. That is correct.
it's tough, so
Yes.
keep working hard.
So the program is working?
The program is working,
Okay.
and we would like to really increase that program if we can.
I move the recommended action.
We have a motion and a second. Seeing no objections, then that passes.
Thank you very
Thanks for the
much.
report. Our next item is item 33. Motion.
Second.
And a second. Seeing no objections, that passes. And then on to what we've got here.
We'll be a closed session done in 5 minutes.
Okay. That item that we just approved was 33 and 34, right, the correspondence agenda. We do have just, I think it's less than 5 minutes.
We have a short thing in closed session?
Okay, so maybe we'll just take how about taking a 4-minute break, maybe even 3 minutes, Supervisor Bennett?
Sure. I was trying to see whether we could say no. We'll be fine. Our 9:30 will be done before.
Okay, thank you. So we'll be back in just a brief
No
few
breaks.
minutes. Fire Department here, if you'd like to come up to the microphone, and I'll go ahead and read this. And it states, whereas the giving of oneself in service empowers both the giver and the recipient, and volunteer actions, big and small, affect positive change within the community. And whereas our country's volunteer force of over 64 million people is one of the greatest treasures and contributes to our future as a caring and productive nation, and National Volunteer Week was first declared in 1974, signed as the President's executive order establishing the week as an annual celebration of volunteering. And whereas every United States president since 1974 has signed an annual proclamation promoting National Volunteer Week, along with governors, mayors, and other elected officials through public statements and proclamations of support. And whereas thousands of volunteers throughout Ventura County connect with community service opportunities made available by county departments such as the Ventura County Fire Department Community Education Program, and utilize their time and talents to make a real difference in the lives of each and every citizen. And whereas during this week, here in Ventura County and all over the nation, service projects will be performed through local community service organizations, and volunteers will be recognized for their commitment to service. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Ventura County Board of Supervisors takes great pleasure in proclaiming April 15th through 21st, 2007, National Volunteer Week, and honors the volunteers of Ventura County who, quote, light the way in the communities. Further, the Board urges all citizens to contribute their time and talents through volunteer work, volunteerism, and the recognition of those who serve. Promotes understanding, compassion, and positive change. And I see we have some of those who serve and promote some of that positive change in our county. And I'll come down there and present this, and if you'd like to speak, please do.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you for recognizing our volunteers and acknowledging the valuable work that they provide for our county. I want to introduce John C. Coles, who is our volunteer coordinator, who volunteers, gathers all of our volunteers. We have two very active volunteers, which is Ray and Ron, and I'll let John say.
Okay, I'm actually relatively new at the fire department since January. I've worked with volunteers for many years, and it's a pleasure to work with the fire department. There's a lot of dedicated people that I've inherited as volunteers and working with them. Individuals that want to give back. Ray O'Grady works 2 days a week in our office in community education, a very valuable part. He does things in the office. He drives around the county doing different things. Spark of Love, he picked up tons of toys from the fire station, so that was extremely helpful. And Ron Bronson works at the fire department with, or volunteers at the fire department with our senior program, teaching seniors about fall prevention and fire safety. And he also is on call, 7-day-a-week shifts for wildfire assistance, and he also they have both volunteered other places and still do volunteer other places. Just real quickly, I know that fiscal issues are always a concern, and volunteers not only give of their time, but they also there's a website called Independent Sector that talks about the monetary value of volunteerism, and I thought I'd just put that out there for y'all. The 2006 national figure just came out as $18.77 an hour is the value of volunteer time, which is up from last year, about 73 cents. And in California in 2005, it was actually $20.36. So it's clearly much higher here than elsewhere. So they give of their time, they save us money, they do things that we couldn't do otherwise, and are certainly appreciated.
Definitely appreciated. Thank you so much for your service and your help.
Well, I just enjoy working with the fire department as a volunteer, and I love the work with the seniors. I do the Remembering When program, which is falls and fire safety, and I will be, in fact, doing one today at noon. And but I want to thank you for this presentation. Thank you so much.
Could you, I'm sorry, could I have that website again? It was Independent
Sector.
Independent Sector. Okay. If I might just say thank you. I see you two everywhere. You are very much involved in the support, and we're fortunate in this county. We have many volunteers in many arenas of service in this county. I think of our Citizens Patrol through our police and sheriff's department, and and they are invaluable to us, very much help us, and thank you so much.
Thank you. I was also thinking our management council, working with the corporate games, is doing a volunteer project with the Habitat for Humanity. I think that's this weekend, too, coming up here. So it's nice to see people volunteering. And when you talk about how many millions of volunteers that are out there, sometimes I wonder if we're double counting, because so often these volunteers are also volunteering somewhere else and then volunteering somewhere else, too. But it's nice. We have a really large force of volunteers, and particularly seniors, once they retire, they're so valuable, and it's so wonderful to have them. So thank you for that. Our next presentation at 9:30 is item 17, and this is a presentation by Supervisor Foy.
I was wondering, the coach, Larry Jones from Moore Park, is here, but his kids haven't quite arrived yet. I don't know if we can put it off a little bit and maybe have the sheriff do it.
Absolutely.
Good, thanks.
Then let's go on. We'll hold off on item. Okay. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on and come right back to it after our next item, which is our sheriff's presentation with Karen Staples in response to a request by, that's a point. I'm sorry, Sheriff Brooks, I made a mistake. We can't hear you until 10 o'clock because it's a time certain. Feel free to go get some coffee. All right, well, that gives us an opportunity to go in closed session, and we'll come back in about 10, 15 minutes and go right to our 9:30 then. Back into our regular session of our April 10th, 2007 Board of Supervisors meeting. Can you just feel the brain power in this room? We have the Moore Park High School Academic Decathlon team, and Supervisor Foy has a presentation.
Well, thank you. This is great. As you can see, these young people out here, this is the decathlon team, I think almost all of them, right, Larry? Missing a few. And his coach, the coach Larry Jones, that Moore Park has this legacy of greatness in what they've been doing over all the years. They have taken first place in 2 national competitions and represented the county in state competition 10 times since 1992. So there's some great stuff coming out of Moore Park, and that's exciting. We have a resolution for you. If all of you want to come down, come up, and I'll read some of the parts of that. So that's all that brain power you said walking down here, huh? Uh-oh. You gotta watch out. She's pretty smart. She could stump you. Anyway, we have a resolution. Moore Park High took first place in the 2007 Ventura County Academic Decathlon. And whereas Moore Park High School Academic Decathlon team has represented the county at state competitions 10 times, I said, since '92. They have a dynasty of excellence in winning. Third place received a perfect score in the super quiz portion. So you want to give them that one? And the 2000 state academic champion, congratulations on that. Anyway, and then their coach Larry Jones has done a lot to help guide these young kids. So let me come down and present this to you. And Larry, maybe I want to make a few comments.
And if I could, just as you're walking down there, Supervisor, I just want to welcome Larry here. I was the academic decathlon coach at Nordhoff High School. Had the pleasure of having our pants beat off by Moore Park over and over again.
You remember?
But, yeah, that's right. But I did want to make this comment, and that in athletics you see it, and in academic decathlon you see it. Sometimes you have coaches that have the right perspective, and sometimes they don't. And it's when a really successful coach, like Larry's been, still has that perspective. Larry was as interested in our students at Nordhoff doing well. He'd come up afterwards and give them suggestions. Now, this is a competitor. This is like going up this is like a coach going up the other team and saying, if you shot your free throw this way, you'd shoot better. But he talked to our kids about, things that they could do in their interviews and stuff, and that really impressed me. And I've talked to other people, and you're still carrying on that tradition. And I just appreciate that you're interested in all students doing well in this performance.
Well, they're all our kids.
Yeah.
So,
thanks a lot.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you.
One of our pleasures this year, we worked really closely with the Oxnard High School team and had them come out to our school, and we tutored them with math and econ. And they have a great coach, Bob Borneman, and he's retiring from teaching and going on to get his PhD now. And I kept telling him, you got to come to state championship once as a wild card. And so these kids kept working with their kids, and they came to state and did really well and took medals that my kids could have won. So anyway, I was just really proud of these students all year. We have 2 that aren't here today. Jonah Buck is back east looking at colleges, and Elizabeth Savick, who is a high-scoring student of Ventura County, is interviewing at Loyola Marymount today. She was accepted to Loyola Marymount, and she's down there for her meetings today. So the other 7, they were given the wrong addresses, why they were late. So anyway, as Supervisor Foy said, we did really well again this year. It was actually our 11th time to the state championship. The last 7 teams have come in second 4 times, and this year was 3rd, and we got beat by 2 great teams. And we were down at El Camino last week helping them and giving the kids all donated their study materials to El Camino that's going to Hawaii in a couple of weeks to win national championship. So I want to let the students introduce themselves. I do have 5 juniors this year, and 2 of them are here, and we're looking forward to next year. They were the first team ever in the history of decathlon. The state championship super quiz was at John Wooden Center, which is always a thrill to be on Johnny Wooden's floor. And the students, it's 7 seconds to answer a question, and they hold up if the student got it right or wrong. And we're the first team ever in all the history of decathlon, any county or state national championship, to get perfect score on super quiz. And we had the highest score ever in super quiz, and we just barely lost to 2 great teams from El Camino and North Hollywood and Granada Hills High. Were all the 4 highest teams in the United States with us. So only 1 got to go on. So I'll let the students introduce themselves and talk about where they're going to go next year. And we appreciate you honoring these kids. They worked really hard. They knew it was an uphill fight when we got the county scores and we were 4th highest in the United States, and the students decided, let's go for it, and they gave it their best shot. Stayed in my classroom till 9 o'clock every night and all day Saturdays and holidays, and would go home and study some more. And we had a great year together, and I'm just really proud of all of them. So I'll let them introduce themselves and talk about where they're going next year. Thank you.
Kevin Seabeck, I'm going to UC Berkeley. Alex Warshoff, I'm either going to UC Berkeley or USC.
I'm Stephanie Pittman, and I'm not sure yet. I'm thinking about UC Santa Cruz, though.
I'm Christy Kai, and I'll be chaining myself to the desk in Mr. Jones' room again next year.
I'm Angela Chen, and I'll still be doing this next year.
I'm Zach Geiger, and I'll be going to UC San Diego next year.
Nathan Spinks, and my school of choice right now is University of California, Santa Barbara.
Well, great. Here is the resolution, and for your school, for yourself, for all of you, congratulations for doing a great job. When you talk about nights till 9 o'clock and weekends and everything else, you guys are young people. There's a lot of other things to do, but it's going to reward you greatly in your life to come. So thanks for making the county proud, your parents proud, I'm sure, your coach proud, your school proud, and we're proud of you. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And each one of the kids, we have one for you too. So if I can't remember the last one for you, Coach.
Okay, great.
And tell me who's the names each one again. Should I remember?
Okay, Jonas is back in Boston.
She's back in Boston. All right. Christy. There you go. Thank you very much. Okay, and Angela up here. Thank you. Zach here.
Thank you.
Good. So you guys remember everything. I can't remember names. Alex? Right down here. I only got 2 guys left. Who would it? No, Stephanie's here. So, Elizabeth, she's not here either?
All right. She's in.
I will go. Good. Okay. There we go. Make it easy. This must be yours. Congratulations. We appreciate all your hard work. Thank you very much.
I just want to say, Mr. Benton, anytime you want to come back to coaching, come on. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Good luck next year, Larry.
It is wonderful to hear about them helping other students, too, in other schools.
I think Supervisor Bennett gives us an unfair advantage with all that knowledge you must have gone through with all those kids in those years, huh? He's forgotten it all?
I didn't have any knowledge, except we did do the super quiz, and we actually won the county super quiz, but I still, to this day, know far more about the trivia of aviation flight than I would ever have wanted to know, I'll tell you.
That's great.
Now we'll go ahead and move on to... we do have a...
What city was the first national airport in? I know. Long Beach.
Carol Dean Williams, you have a card on this item.
Thank you. How much time do I have left? 3:25?
2 minutes and 25 seconds.
Carol Dean Williams, I feel re-intelligent today. This camera for 8 months went into the Hall of Justice till March 13th. Sergeant Bailey said no, but he allows cell phone cameras, so I asked the decathlon team, was there any difference between this camera and the cell phone camera? And they said no. And then Johnny Johnson in email, he says, no, there's no difference. But Sheriff Brooks, I like you, but Sheriff Brooks says, yes, there's a difference. But Sergeant Bailey admitted that he violated Ordinance Code 4197 for 8 months for letting this camera go in the Hall of Justice. That's a misdemeanor. I'm going to file a complaint that he has breached security for 8 months. And here's another citizen that has not fallen to stupidity. She gives the definition of stupidity.
Mr. Dean, there is a microphone, so you don't need to yell.
Thank you.
Oh, Mr. Williams, sorry.
That's okay. Irma Redneck defines stupidity, just the lack of sense we as citizens of this county do not want serving on juries. Sheriff, come up and tell us that it is your training and policy to pull a gun in a criminal courtroom, and was all the other criminal courtrooms pull their weapons to shoot in the dark. Oh, I'm glad my intelligence is revitalized today. But every time I go in the Hall of Justice, I have to meet stupidity. Stupidity, stupidity. I just can't stand stupidity.
Thank you.
We encourage you to stay out of the Hall of Justice.
Yeah. And that concludes that item. Now we'll go on to our 10 a.m. time certain. And this is a presentation by Sheriff Brooks and Karen Staples, and this is regarding a request by Supervisor Long on our report back on how our jails are doing in probation.
Madam Chair, if I might just quickly just say a few words to thank both the Sheriff and Ms. Staples for getting this back to us as quickly as you did. And certainly, I'm sure the board will have lots of questions, but thank you. I know it's been a lot to do and a lot of unknowns yet, so thanks.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, and we appreciate your providing the time to us. This is a timely issue, and we appreciated Supervisor Long's questions. It wasn't just a difficult thing to do, but the rules kept changing as we went along in the process. So everything changed when you spoke to anyone in Sacramento, and you'd have to revise. But I think we have a fair picture of what's happening. When you talked about all the brain power in the room, my staff started to come forward. I had to remind them that we weren't on until 10 o'clock. But they're here to back me up if you have any very difficult questions, so we'll be okay. Appreciate the opportunity for Karen and I to be able to give you a perspective on the California prison and jail reform package that keeps changing and amending, because it has a very real impact on the county of Ventura. And although it's problematic, I think in the middle of this problem there's some opportunities, and we may find some ways to benefit as a result of working with the state. Right now, you're aware of the crisis in state corrections. There's a tremendous amount of both media attention to it and political dialogue. The governor's come up with some proposals, the legislators responded, but the crisis point is they're at double their population in their 33 key facilities, and they're gaining attention by the federal courts and other courts, looking for remedies, forcing their hand to be able to do something. And what they're trying to do is make sure that at least the most serious offenders remain locked up, and secondarily that they can provide some kind of rehabilitative reentry program to lower the total population of not only the state prison but local jail populations, and help people reintegrate into society without quickly reoffending and going back into corrections, which we would all applaud. Right now, the overpopulation in the prison system is 70,000. A federal court has given the governor until May to come back with a plan to correct that. The plan can't be fixed all within the prison confines, and they're aware of that. The medical system has also been heavily criticized, and that's under federal oversight. And the quick fix was to just displace that large population, at least 40,000 of the 70,000, down to local jails. The governor's first attempt was to say that any inmates with a sentence of 3 years or less would just remain in local jails, wouldn't be accepted by state prisons. Your bus would have to turn around and bring them back. The cost of that is phenomenal to the county of Ventura. We'll talk about the cost a little later. Fortunately, the governor's changed his position on that just in the last week. California state sheriffs, along with CSAC and other legislative associations, have worked with him on a compromise plan that I think provides some benefit to us. So the big shift that we're talking about won't be what we probably will face. But right now, 37% of the counties, the 58 counties in California, have court-ordered caps. They can't accept any state inmates. The rest of them are overcrowded. Ventura County is over our population level, and we're having difficulties dealing with that. So a displacement of state inmates to local corrections is completely unworkable. But on the other hand, if it was imposed, we'd still be faced with having to deal with it. The plan that the governor initially proposed would have shipped about 600 inmates immediately to Ventura County, in excess of our regular population. That's at an operational cost of $40 million a year without any construction cost associated with it. There's a rotating cycle of those inmates, but you'd be getting about 600 new ones every year. Not all of them would remain in custody for the full 3 years, but somewhere between 1,000 and 1,800 additional inmates would begin filling our overcrowded jails. That does not include any kind of reentry options that are being discussed. Giving you a perspective on where we are in terms of jail capacity, we have 1,575 beds. We're only able to fill about 1,496 of those for classification reasons, keeping people away from other people that would harm them or who they might harm. So we're overcrowded by 200, and we're coping with that by putting inmates in extra bunks in day rooms that aren't made for inmate population, having to lock down sections, do some things that affect us in the area of programming and also affect us living up to our required standards and mandates. If we received 600 inmates a year, within 3 years our population would double, as you can see from that chart. And while we're talking about an expansion of Todd Road, you can see the impact that does to our planning and our options. We're talking about an inmate population that would consistently be sustainable at twice what it is today. The basic elements of the state plan, or the state plan that they're now discussing with state sheriffs, that has the buy-in of the the key five in state government, including the governor, is increasing the capacity of local jails and prisons, not trying to fix the problem just in one direction, but including both counties and the state as a solution. Establishing reentry facilities so that you wouldn't be getting the currently and recently sentenced hardcore offenders. You'd be getting people, if you get a displacement at all, that were in their last probably 12 months before release, who are less motivated to reoffend and cause you problems within local corrections. Allowing counties to work with the state to determine what the best reentry programs are and not have programs mandated to us. Securing state funds for corrections, and for construction, and that's part of the opportunity. There's $2 billion reserved for construction of jail beds. Counties at this point are talked about as either being able to buy in or not buy into the program, but there's some definite benefits in at least examining that possibility. What the states are looking for is, or what the sheriffs are looking for and counties are looking for, is to not be the dumping ground for the state's problems. They want to be partners. They want to have a say at the table. They want there to be incentives in terms of not only construction funding but operational funding. If we have state inmates pending reentry staying in our facilities, we want the state to pay for not only the building but the staff. There are other things that may be benefits, and then operational costs are deal breakers, and mandates are a deal breaker. When you take a look at the options available, they're basically talking about three components of construction. One is 16,000 regular beds. They fast-track those beds on existing state facilities. In addition, 7,500 medical beds. They think they can populate those within 12 to 18 months on existing prison grounds. It has very little impact on us. The second is construction and operation of 16,000 reentry beds. Reentry is probably happening. Whether we participated in or not, there will be a flow of inmates who've gone to prison from Ventura County that are going to be coming back and coming back early to help integrate them into the community. They may come back in a joint facility run by the state and local government, or they may go to state facilities. They're put wherever they can find the land. And then the third 16,000 beds, which because of the match will actually be between 18 and 20,000 beds, will go to local corrections. I asked the question during that, do you have a better chance of getting that money for local beds if you participate in the reentry process? They just kind of smiled and said, well, we're not saying that, but obviously there's an advantage if you're helping them in another arena. We're planning to Expand Todd Road, we've been working with the CEO, Public Works, GSA, and others. You'll be having a presentation in May on that, and we have agency representatives here if you have questions about that. I won't go into that report, but one of the keys to the report is that we have a fairly good idea of what our population should be over the next 5, 10, and 15 years. And those are options 1, 2, and 3. 528 beds equates to a construction cost of $75 million. The option 2 is $89 million. Option 3 is $97 million. So they're all relatively closely compact in terms of construction cost. But if you build on an option 4, which we have to look at with the assumption that we might be getting state inmates to some degree, then you're up to $139 million with really exaggerated operational cost. The position that the sheriffs have taken is that the federal court is not going to back away from this problem. And if the state cannot find an answer that incorporates counties, they may just impose one, and the governor's plan may be back on the books. Even if he doesn't agree to it, the courts may mandate it. So we have to take a look at that possibility, but we also have to take a look at the opportunity that if we work with them, we may be able to keep that number down. We may be able to work with them on a classification of inmates that's far less serious and less of a threat to the community. We may be able to get construction costs to complete some of our needs and provide for future funding and future housing.
We do have one question, Sheriff.
Sure. Just a clarification. The 1, 2, and 3 options are with our existing projections and with our existing population.
Yes.
And the build-out includes a state possible projection.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Build-out 4 was built on the governor's proposal, which basically would add around 1,600 beds. Okay. It may be less than that if it's just a reentry proposal, which is what the legislature is moving for and what the governor is moving toward, which would drop that to closer to 2,000. So, but this is all very nebulous, and it will change. And one of the reasons for bringing it to you now is you still have the ability to influence state assembly and state senate representatives of this community in favor of a direction the county would like to go. We probably won't have more than about 30 days to make that impact before it goes back before a judge and things may be set. And so the timing of this becomes very important. When we talk about how we cope with the overcrowding that we have now, we're doing a number of things. We're releasing 4,000 inmates 5 days early from their sentence to keep our population down. When fresh misdemeanor offenders are booked, they're released on citation. When people are booked on warrants for a low bail or traffic warrants, they're cited and released again. As I mentioned, we're using day rooms for housing of inmates. We're having forced lockdowns because of the staff's inability to patrol that area when we can't lock down whole housing units. And we're working with probation on some other aspects, and Karen will talk about that.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's been about a year since Chief Kemp and I started talking about detention alternatives. So this is not something that is just a response to the crisis right now. But we've been talking about detention alternatives and jail alternatives for some of the selected inmates within the jail. A couple of the ideas that we have come up with is, first of all, out at our work furlough facility, we have a corridor that is vacant because, as you know, if you've ever been out to the work furlough facility, you've seen it. It's an old building. It was officer barracks for, I believe, in World War II, and it's just been renovated, and there's a whole section of it that needs to be renovated. We met with GSA. They gave us an estimate of $1.5 million, and we have included that in our budget for 07-08 in the hopes that if we can renovate that, we would be able to add 40 to 60 beds. One of the things that we also talked about was that adding 40 to 60 beds is nice, but this is really going to fit in really nicely with the governor's budget. As you know, in the governor's budget, there's about $50 million that is supposed to go to probation for that programming for those 18 to 24-year-old, those young adult offenders, in the hopes that we can make an impact with them and keep them from going deeper into the system. These beds out at work furlough would be identified for that young population, and what we have already set up is a contract in the works with the County Adult Literacy Program to do ESL classes, to do GED classes, and hopefully get these young people prepared to go out and look for work. I believe it's Father Boyle, who works with the homeboys down in Los Angeles, said, you know, the best way to stop a bullet is with a job. And I really believe that. Probation has demonstrated with the money that we've gotten for juveniles that putting money in the beginning of the system and diverting those kids out of the system is preventing them from going through the system, and we're hoping that with the money that the governor is going to give us, that we will be able to do that same thing with that young adult population.
We have one question.
Yes.
Would that $50 or $60 million be available for the 1.5 million capital improvements or for the programming?
It's just for programming.
That's what I thought.
Right now, and again, that's up in the air. We do not have the guidelines, and we believe that CSA will be distributing the money using similar guidelines that they're using now for our juvenile money. So we're really not sure. And right now, that $50 million is an uphill battle for the governor. He's committed to keeping it into his budget. He spoke with chief probation officers 2 weeks ago and said, I'm committed to keep it there. But as you see, the budget's not really in good shape on the state level, and he's feeling a lot of pressure not to start new programs when he's going to have to cut other programs.
Where are you in the process of identifying the 1.5 million capital?
Right now, it's in the budget for next year. It's a capital improvements request, just for the, you know, coming as part of our budget, and that'll be up to you.
Thank you.
I'd be very interested in seeing if we do go down this path that you're suggesting with really helping these younger offenders, seeing how it works, you know, to make sure we have a good monitoring system in place to see whether we have the quick recidivism and all.
We have a lot to do. You know, we have to do our needs assessment to identify the service gaps and everything. But that is one service gap that has been identified, research for years. So
isn't it
track.
true like most of the people in jail are repeat offenders?
Yes.
So
and we'd like to break that cycle.
Right. Thank you.
In addition to what we're looking at work furlough, we're also looking at resurrecting the old county parole system, and that's basically a system where an inmate, once they've served half their time, can petition to be paroled from jail, and they have to give reasons why it would be, you know, something that they would be able to do. And then if they are paroled, they would be supervised by probation officers while they're finishing out their sentence in the community. Another alternative is we're looking at releasing low-level unsentenced inmates on supervised OR. In other words, people who are awaiting trial and would be, again, released under some type of monitoring, some type of supervision. And then the last one you see up there is explore the feasibility of electronic monitoring, probably in combination with supervision and other types of, you know, supervision kinds of programs for those people. So we're working with these with the sheriff. These ideas or these programs aren't going to solve the crowding problem in the jails, but I think it will help identify those inmates who can be monitored and supervised effectively in the community without jeopardizing the safety and the security of the community, which leaves the more secure jail beds for people who really need to be in those secure beds.
And that probably answers my question regarding exploring the feasibility of electronic monitoring. That would also be for the low level.
Absolutely low level, right. We have an EM program right now with juveniles, and it's very successful, and it's that whole idea is that they, you know, they have the little ankle bracelet, and we monitor where they are and where they're supposed to be, and if they don't do what they're supposed to be, then we, you know, they go back into custody. But we also provide some kind of programming and start the reintegration process back into the community.
Does that complete your presentation?
Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. When we talk about the impact of either a forced displacement of state inmates to the county or any other increase in population beyond what we are now without construction, we look at losing the ability to deal with people who have violated gang injunctions, who've committed acts of domestic violence, who violated probation terms, If you have a Prop 36 or you're on electronic monitoring and you violate it and there's nowhere to go, the program doesn't have much of a life, who sell illicit drugs or committed other serious felonies. We're dangerously close to that now with the release programs that we're having to put into place. We had the county parole committee working for a number of years, and frankly, the jail population was so hardened, otherwise they would have been in a diversion program, that I think in the 4 years that I sat on that committee, we released one person and he had AIDS and he was dying. Everyone else was hardened enough of a repeat offender if they put in for it that they weren't qualifying. So when we take a look at anything that pushes us to that kind of extreme, really what they're experiencing today in LA County, you run into a forced elimination of all your misdemeanor and unsentenced population for the most part. They're the first ones to go, and then you start dealing with nonviolent felonies after that. Unsentenced inmates that are in jail now are generally there because they've already failed to appear in court before. They have a history of violence. They have a history of repeat offenses or such a significant criminal history that the judge doesn't release them pending trial. Sentenced inmates that are in jail usually are, rather than diversion, are there for extensive histories as well, or for violent capabilities, or because they haven't worked out in probation or other diversion programs. So that's the first course of recourse if we are looking at something like that. When we take a look at the quality of life issues, the minute you don't have a place to put a freshly arrested person, you end up rearresting the same people over and over again because you arrest them, you book them, or you release them on a citation. They don't go to court. The court system starts to begin to break down because of the failure of the court calendar, because defendants aren't showing up. Officers are rearresting them, taking more time to put them back in, to rearrest them and release them again. So it really becomes a choke point at which the whole system begins to suffer. In conclusion, as we take a look at this, there are some opportunities. As you saw when we were looking at construction, we were looking at a phase one, which would take us 5 years out in terms of meeting our needs. Well, it takes 5 years to build, so it'll be full when you open the doors. Phase two was 10 years out. Phase three was 15 years out. When you take a look at the potential of a joint project with the state, there are a number of things that you can look at. One is we can get help with our construction funding out of that third 1,600 beds. Right now, the county's in a position they could borrow the money to build the jail. Debt service would be probably handled by the general fund, but there's no operational money to staff it. But if you could find construction money from another source, that would free up debt service, and you'd have operational money. You could actually staff the facility you built. That's one of the things that we're taking a look at. We may come up with a better plan for reentry than what they might impose. We might have more control over the people that they send back to the county and that we accept, working with probation and with local vendors, local employers. We'd be more effective at placing them than the state might be. When you take a look at what a reentry bed is, a reentry bed can either be a 6-bedroom house in the middle of a track, or an apartment building in the middle of town, or it can be part of Todd Road and can look like any other part of Todd Road. It's completely wide open. So there's the possibility of joint venturing with them to build a reentry facility or reentry housing unit, and over a period of time have that revert to the county. Since it's on county land, we put a match into it. That would provide for future growth. They may get 10 years service out of it and then have to find another option. There are a lot of negotiable things that we can do that may benefit the county of Ventura. And what I'm asking for you to do, while everything is still in a fairly flexible format, is to authorize the CEO, myself and Karen, to negotiate with the state to see if we can find something that would benefit the county, the citizens of the county, our financial position in terms of jails, and our housing situation in terms of population, and meet some of their needs at the same time. It may not work. We don't have anything to lose for trying, but I think they're amenable enough and so desirous of finding counties that volunteer to work with them that I think they'll make it worth our while to at least examine those possibilities. So I leave you with that request.
Mm-hmm. Supervisor Bennett?
I have a question for both you and Karen, if you could both put your heads together on this. You talked about the possibility of some people going on to parole. What's the cost savings? Because those people on parole you'll have to have probation people assigned to them, but it obviously much less expensive than 24/7 in the jail. Do you guys know what that number is?
I don't know. You know, we cost out an inmate in jail at $185 a day. Karen, do you know?
I can get you those figures. We have like I said, an electronic monitoring program which keeps kids out of juvenile hall, and I can get you the cost as to what it costs to have a kid on EM or out there rather than in custody. But it's appreciably less because, as you know, in institutions it's 24/7, so you have someone supervising those people on 3 different shifts, so it's really a 3-to-1 kind of ratio, where out in the community it would be I think electronic monitoring right now is 1 probation officer for every 25 to 30 kids. So it's appreciably less expensive, and also it gives the kids a chance to be in school, be home with their families, where we can work, they can attend treatment, and they're not locked up.
My second question is for the sheriff and to some extent the CEO. You talk about authorization to go and negotiate with the state, and I appreciate sort of a fundamental question: do we want to even entertain that possibility? And I think there are lots of probably political implications both ways. I would offer, though, I think we're faced with the choice of we either negotiate and see if we can get something that's a good deal for us, or very likely have it shoved down our throats. So I'm all in favor of negotiating. It's a tough issue, and negotiations like this cause everybody to rethink and therefore come up with more creative solutions. Just for example, instead of keeping offenders that are 3 years or less here, having offenders that are at the end of the cycle are probably better offenders to be at the local level and out of state prison. And that's just kind of common sense stuff that I'm sure you'll come up with. And just the assurance that whatever it is that you come up with, if you'll keep us posted during those negotiations so that we don't end up, getting surprised by something that'd be
let me clarify the wording that I used. What I want is the authority to have discussions.
Okay.
Because we don't have the authority to make any kind of an agreement with the state. The object would be to see if there's something that we can bring back to the board as a recommendation.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair.
Supervisor Long?
And I know there's been some discussions of the state probation officers in all of this, and at one point there was an offer on the table at $94,000 per ward, and probation officers came back at $125,000. But the discussions on the adult side is really just to look at construction dollars to offset with a low match, 25% match. But there hasn't been discussion of any additional operational dollars.
The conversation with the governor and the leaders of the Assembly and Senate are that operational dollars will be included in any proposal. Now that's verbal. It could change at any time.
Right.
And Supervisor Bennett's absolutely right. And the only reason we would even entertain a dialogue is the alternative to talking to them is you may have a solution for them imposed on us with none of the money with it. So, we figure that we're better helping to craft a solution than sitting on the sidelines waiting for them to see what they do to us.
Absolutely agree, because it's going to come to us, one form or another, and at whatever levels they're able to ratchet down and feel like, obviously they're under federal mandate.
Well, I appreciate you bringing this forward. The states, while they're saying they'll provide some funding, the whole basis of this is for them to reduce their funding, because in truth they could be increasing their jail populations and increasing the size of their jails and staffing, but they've decided to pass it down to the locals, and the reason for that can only be that they're trying to reduce their costs, which means that we'll be picking those up. I mean, that's right. What I look at it as. Otherwise they could be handling this themselves.
Well, there's also the philosophical battle going on between the governor and the state leadership as to whether building our way out of this is the right path to go, building more state prisons, and all the issues of doing that as the sole model. I think that the Sentencing Commission was a good step in the right direction, and I think that looking at the philosophy of reentry and working with these folks, particularly our youth, is one that we have adopted. So, no question there, but it will not be cost neutral. End of the story. It won't be cost neutral to us. So.
And one of the things that I wanted to bring up about reentry is it's a system that really has some promise. When you're released from prison, you get a bus ticket and a $200 check, and a lot of them are back in jail within a week. A lot of them have violated, pretty quickly. They have nowhere to go. Your 200 runs out pretty quickly. Having a system that works with them to provide not only the building of skills, educational skills, vocational skills, but placement in a job, placement in a housing environment, does help to cut down on recidivism. And it's a worthwhile program for the county to look at as well, in terms of if there was a state program providing all of those services, partnering with them, possibly with our inmates in the last part of their sentence, to benefit from some of those same things.
And Madam Chair, one of the I'm serving on the CSAC Executive Steering Committee on Corrections Reform, and it's so far just conference calls that are taking place. In fact, only one so far, but there will be others, because this is going to move rather quickly. And one of the questions was has there been some analysis on the true cost of implementing the Farrow decision, that federal decision that says that we must take care of these inmates in an environment that's humane. And I know CSAC's working on trying to get some more numbers that then looks at that and the build out option and then the push down to local communities. But sometimes you've got apples and oranges, and it's
And we have some leverage because we have land, we have a plan. We've got a facility that's amenable to that. So, in terms of competing with other counties for available construction dollars and operational dollars, we're better off than many.
Supervisor Foy?
I know there's some difficulty, I guess, in some areas. We're going to see some short-term solutions. We can't move prisoners out of the state.
Well, the governor can't move prisoners out of the state. That probably will not work. He was sued basically by the Correctional Officers Association and lost that, and it was likely that he would, because they're not treating every inmate of the same class the same way, and you can't deal with that disparity unless you have volunteers.
Right.
So I don't think that's so.
And so there's no even the feds can't put a short-term solution to do that or something, because we know we have space outside the state to do that kind of thing, and we're not going to get any other changes. Okay.
They're actually volunteers.
Yeah.
Well, it just shows how important the effectiveness of alternative programs to jail need to be before we can really start saving a little money in terms of using them, but making sure that they're effective.
I was going to make that exact same point, and that is that when you get faced with these jail crisis problems, it does remind you that if you can find ways to end the recidivism, and if you can, all of that stuff has to, and the difficulty is to demonstrate that it's actually working so that the public can support it. I think and that's really the trick. But I think if we have probably as good of opportunity to do that here in Ventura County as anybody, with skilled people in probation and the work that you guys are doing in the sheriff and the jails and stuff. So I hope that we'd be able to do that. Supervisor Long brought this, so I'll be happy to second it if she's going to make the motion. But before she does it, I'd just like to take this opportunity to also point out this is just one of many times where Supervisor Long's done a pretty good job of being in coordinating local and state issues because of your work at CSAC. We oftentimes have this stuff, and as a result, we get out in front of some of these issues. So thank you for doing that.
Well, and thank you. And I'd like to say that I think we do have on the ground some very good local programs, and we have a good track record of particularly working with the youth and the juveniles. Just 2 weeks ago, the Boys and Girls Club going into the JJC. Those are things that will make a difference on that. It takes time, and there's also the Community Action Partnership that I'm serving on with Mayor Oxnard and good people looking at, other programs and models to put in place. So I think we are in a good position to change that and make a difference. But I certainly agree with the recommendation by both of you that we give direction that we should start the discussion at the state, because we again want to be as much in control of our own destiny as possible in the reform that's going to take place. So to have the CEO certainly work closely on this, and I will certainly continue to make sure I communicate as CSAC works on this, and it's going to move fast. So,
Is that your motion?
that is my motion.
I have a card.
He has a card. You have 23 seconds.
I would just also just comment as we're moving forward that it is really important what you said to make sure that we are in control of our own destiny. We saw what happened with the Prop 36 program where that voters put into place, but it just isn't as effective as everybody intended it to be. And being able to be at the front end of these things and developing the programs is a lot better than trying to match one that already exists. Carol Dean Williams, you have 23 seconds.
The assistant sheriff of Orange County was sent to jail, and he had his choice. He chose a jail in Fullerton, and he pays $100 a day. That's $36,000 a year. How many country club beds do we have in Ventura County that can bring in $36,000 a year, and it costs $185,000 to house a prisoner? Fullerton has to be making a profit on the assistant sheriff. He gets his cell phone.
Thank you. Your time
Can I
is-
summarize?
I think you did, but 23 seconds is kind of hard to get it all in. But thank you, and thank you for giving us that suggestion that maybe we can actually make some money off of prisoners.
Well, thank you for acknowledging the suggestion.
Yes. All right, so now we're back to the motion Supervisor Long had put back on the table. And
Right.
we had a second by Supervisor Bennett. Are there any objections? No. That passes. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you
the
again
report.
for
Really
putting that
appreciate
together.
it.
Thanks.
If also,
teamwork.
if we can get some information about, I don't know when we'll be hearing back on that Prop 36 since it's switched over from behavioral health to probation. It'd be nice to get some information on how it's going. Thank you.
Actually, there's a report that's come out, UCLA, and I
Right.
just received it.
Right.
If you
but
did.
I wanted to look specifically at our county
Right.
and how we are
Sure.
doing. The UCLA report on Prop 36 was pretty damning, I think, from its effectiveness. The percentage of people that are actually, Okay. Now there's been some new information out too. That concludes item 18, and we'll now move to Mr. Johnson, who will do our oral presentation on our budget.
Paul's here, good. Yesterday, Supervisor Foy and I were discussing the budget process, and one of the good things about having fresh eyes and someone who is genetically predisposed to ask questions is that we all have to, look at what we're doing and be sure we know what we're doing, and also be sure everybody else knows what we're doing. So what I'd like to do this morning is to very briefly kind of run through the process. We're getting to a point where we're now going into the balancing portion of the budget, but by history, we had about 3 years of forced retrenchment here. For those of you who are on the board, you know what that meant. That meant that we had so much money, we made a determination how you were going to allot that, and departments were simply told, you have to figure out a way to retool yourself, reorganize, and get the job done. And in some instances, you gave exemptions, like in the case of public safety, where we didn't want to do layoffs. Based on your priorities. So, after that 3-year period, and correct me if someone has a different view, but I view the budget that we have to be reflective of the board's priorities as of today, until your board changes those priorities. And so, what we do is we put a price tag on those priorities going forward, and then we compare it to the projected revenues of the county, and we do a 5-year forecast where we try to keep an eye on where it is we may end up so that we may keep the budget sustainable. So we have reached that stage where we've estimated the expenditures in terms of the cost of the priorities and the revenues that will be coming in, and we've reported to you that there's a gap. It's not a large gap, but nonetheless it is a gap, and that is where the balancing act comes in. But what we do, sometimes, like last year, there wasn't a gap. We actually had a few extra dollars. That's much easier in one sense, but when you have a shortfall, you have to figure out how do you cut that, and the priority that we follow is try to either increase the revenues, if there are any ways to revenue enhancing. We work with the departments on that. If they can increase the revenues, that helps close the gap. And then in the alternative, we try to find non-service program delivery kinds of cuts that we can make that will allow us to continue basically maintaining your priorities. And that's where we are today. We do have a shortfall, and we are looking for those areas where we can either get a little more money or have a little less cost without affecting program delivery. We don't know if we're going to get there. We think we are, but we have two things your board's approved, actually three. We have the issues related to the legal support for the Administrator Guardian's office that are going to have to be coped with. We are going to have to staff the reverse 911 system, the Sheriff's Office, and your board has indicated that you would like to restore the gang unit as best we can. So those are all costs that are above and beyond this year's service. So we will work and try to bring you a balanced budget if possible. The way I go about this is that we ask the departments, once they receive their target budget, to come meet with me. It's a voluntary process. They don't have to do it, but it's an opportunity for them to come in and discuss what their problems are, what their needs are, but it's also an opportunity for us to be sure we haven't overlooked something. Sometimes in the budget process from the center, things like salary savings, contracts, there are a number of things that are out there that we might not be aware of that the department is, and so we kind of reconcile that to be sure that everything's in that target budget that should be in there, and that whatever gap we're measuring is realistic. So after that is done, we have almost every department has a wish list, in some cases a needs list that they would like us to consider. The way I go about that is I ask them to explain to me why that has risen to a level where we need to do it, and then the question is, do we have extra funding that we can put into that without cutting someone else, or why we would, do we have a compelling argument to go to the board and say we need to cut someplace else in order to accommodate this. And that's kind of where we are right now. But I also say to the department heads that I will support those activities where the case has been made and we can figure out how to fund it. If we can't fund it or the case has not been made, they're all encouraged to still evaluate their needs and come before the board in study session and during the budget hearings to make their case. And then ultimately your board gets to decide. You have the privilege of trying to maybe stretch too few dollars over too many needs, but you then set the priorities for the following year. That's kind of what the process is. I don't know if Paul, is there anything I left out on that? Do you have anything that you want to report today, or are we, no? Okay, so next couple of weeks after we continue the weaning or the pairing process, trying to see if there's a way to make this all work without having to have your board have to do some forced cuts. I don't make recommendations for those additional programs that are not afforded, and I also don't make the decision on, or make a recommendation as to who is least worthy these days. I think everybody now has what the board believes is necessary and that I believe is necessary, and so then it becomes a question of each person sort of defending their turf if we have to cut back. But the budget office and I, if we have to get into those program areas, we'll look at it and see if there are some areas that are not mandated, and we'll identify those for your board, because there are some areas where departments can't reduce, and unfortunately those who are not protected or shackled by mandates, they become the candidates. So that's a quick overview of how it works. If anybody has a different understanding or some better ideas, we'd be happy to hear them.
Better way to do it? Supervisor Bennett?
I certainly don't have a different understanding or probably even a better idea. But I just would like to emphasize that when we were cutting back during those 3 years of retrenchment, that we were not only balancing the budget then, but we were getting ourselves to the point where, as we decrease the size of government, we actually could start to have our revenues match the increased cost. Had we not cut back for those 3 years, even this year with our revenue growth, we'd be in a much more serious spot. So there is something about making sure we keep government at the right size so that you can grow with your current service levels and stuff in terms of doing it. That's one. The second thing, I've been here and I keep waiting for the right time to have one priority move up, and that is code enforcement. And it's always talked about. We're almost always find ourselves in that situation where we're starting to say, hey, there's nothing that we can, we're back where we don't have, for example, right now you're telling us we don't have enough money to fund what we currently do. So you're always going, wait, do you start another program in that situation? So I guess partially, I believe that the board has some interest in code enforcement. I think it is growing in terms of sort of a sense of, huh?
Did you say interesting?
Interest in.
Oh, interesting.
In increasing code enforcement. And I guess I'd just like to, perhaps the approach is not necessarily, in our overall budget, but in RMA in terms of how they're structured maybe that needs to be examined and see if there's some other ways that we could spend those resources so that we feel like there is more code enforcement happening, because the sense of delay and backlog there is pretty extreme. So we may be going through another year where we can't find more code enforcement, but I just wanted to get it on the radar screen. It will be something I'll be spending time this spring trying to see if that can work out. I wanted to get that stated publicly. Thank you.
Supervisor Long and Supervisor Foy.
Well, just a comment to make that we have gone through tough times, and we've looked at what has been a structural deficit, and we've been able to, I believe, at least bring some balance to that. And I would think that if there are supplemental requests that are going to come forward, that there is some convincing evidence of past history as to both and I'm not asking for benchmarking studies, but some past history as to what workloads there were, what staff was lost. Are the workloads still the same? Are they increasing? Have some responsibilities been shifted? And the no new programs in the sense of new programs, but looking at again those responsibilities that are identified. Clearly the mandates, we've always been challenged with making sure that we fulfill mandates. And are we overfilling mandates? And again, to be very forthright in the information as to the changing conditions in departments that may reflect their need or give us a good picture of the responsibilities and the workload.
And Supervisor Foy,
Can I just piggyback on that just real quick? I think when you talked about doing that, I think also trying to find, are there other counties, how are they doing that? Are there other counties doing it differently and finding a way to meet the mandates or meet those responsibilities in a different way? Thank you.
Supervisor Foy.
I think they're both good comments and bring up some, because this comes down for an understanding of myself here is that when things get tight, you need to start looking at priorities. And priorities, like you'd said, we kind of what the priorities the board has been in the past, and maybe it's an opportunity for us now to decide what are our priorities and what do we want to see. Because at some point, when you go out to say, I got to make some little cuts here, or there's no expansion here, what do we want to, what are those areas we're going to have to go after? Because we're going to say these are our mandate. We know that bringing this gang unit has been back, and it's got some positive implications. But what are the other things that we want to look at? What are they? And we may have to spend some time with that discussion so that we don't get down towards the end and you're saying, I'm going to maybe have to make a little cut here, and we go, hold on, don't do that. Or maybe, I think we should probably start to look at some of that. Like you've got some ideas yourself on code enforcement. Well, do we want to cut that? If you want more of that, we say we don't want to probably cut that. We want to cut something else. And so I think we've got to figure out what those priorities are. And those always change year after year. So I think it's something we should be looking at.
And I also agree, looking at increasing code enforcement is something I've been pushing for a while, but I think it's also interesting, your idea about looking at resource management agency. One of the things that I'm concerned with is that they aren't overloaded. And the reason I'm concerned for that is because I don't see things coming out, just going in oftentimes, and that particularly directions from the board. So then it's just a matter of weighing, if we're talking about the budget reflecting our priorities, I don't see that we're necessarily getting what we budgeted in the last session, or maybe that it was insufficient, but I would like to be able to look at that. And I think it would be helpful to get it, if there is a list. We do see what they're doing under the general plan and all the programs that they're doing, but there seems to be a lot of work that gets assigned to that department, and I don't know if we need to look a little closer at it. All right, well, that concludes our budget discussion. Did you have anything else you want to add to it? No. Okay, and then we'll need a motion to receive and file. Motion is second. No objection, that passes. The rest of our board meeting is going to be our closed session, so we'll go ahead and go from our regular session to the Air Pollution Control Board, and then from there we go into closed session. It'll probably be helpful to have a time when we're going to go into closed session. I'm not sure about the APCD board meeting, if that's, do you think that's about an hour long, do you think? Does that sound about right? Okay, would the board, would coming back into closed session at 12:30 work for everybody on the board? It's 11 o'clock now. I'm thinking 12:30. At 11 o'clock, we've got the APCD board meeting. Okay, do you want to go into closed session at 12? Okay. All right, then we'll go into closed session at noon, and then we adjourn from there. Thank you.
I would probably want to make sure that Mr. Villegas and our staff heard that the board's trying to go into closed session at noon. Yeah, okay. That's what we were trying to say, yeah.